Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing GODS Heist from Triton Nar. GODS Heist is a stealth-based 1-to-4 player game in which players are playing as Marauders, who are wandering into these caverns over here to go ahead and rescue the various artifacts, which will then come in handy in future games, while trying to avoid the Drakonids, who are going to be wandering around these boards over here and getting in the player's way. I should note before we go further, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But like I said already, a 1-to-4 player game. It's going to be stealth-based. You're going to have Marauders trying to collect artifacts. The general idea is you are playing on these maps over here. I have one particular scenario set up. You can go ahead and check out the gameplay of this scenario if you want to see me play through this, but you're going to go through a bunch of scenarios. My prototype over here comes with 6 scenarios in it. I do not know the number of scenarios in the final game, but each scenario is going to give you a configuration of tiles, a way to set them up, and then you're going to be diving into this adventure. Now, there's a bunch of things to get through on the side, but let me focus on the core mechanisms of how your turn operates and what you're trying to do before we touch upon those side things. The core idea is you're going to have control of Marauders. You control between 2 to 4 Marauders. I don't believe there's, at least currently, you don't control 1 Marauder. It's always going to be 2 to 4, even if you're playing it solo. But you can control 2 to 4 Marauders, picking from the various Marauders you have in play. I believe there might be opportunities to unlock things as you go, unlock more characters. But starting off, from the Marauders you have over here, grab the Marauders you want, and then you're going to have their action decks, as well as their deck of cards over here. You see, players are going to basically be operating in a slightly atypical way compared to what you might be used to. There's not a typical scenario where there's a hero turn and an enemy turn or anything like that. There's not even a clear initiative order in which you know the order of what's happening. Rather, players can go ahead and play any cards from their hand of cards. So for instance, when you start the game, you might have Solinar over here, and Solinar might have these 4 cards that represent his hand of cards that usually give him various options as far as mitigation or extra abilities or things. But the main thing to realize is these are usually not your core actions in the game. Rather, these will give you opportunities or tools or let you do things, but the core actions are going to come from the action deck, where you're going to be looking through the actions over here and then drawing an action card, and look at that, Solinar is going to go ahead and move, and he can either move 5 or he can attack. So the way the structure is going to work when you're going is all the Marauders in play can choose to play any of their core cards if they want, or alternatively, if not, you draw a card from the top of the action deck in which all your Marauders cards are shuffled together, but the problem is, so are the Drakonids. The Drakonids also have their cards shuffled together in this deck of cards over here. So what happens is you draw a card, and maybe it's a Marauder, maybe it's we have Draka going, we have over here, we have Solinar going, and then we have Draka, and I guess the Drakonids are all out over here. Where are my Drakonids over here? We have a Draconid turn over here, where you're going to go ahead and activate the enemies. Which means players have a little bit of control over, are we prepped? Are we prepped for bad things happening? Because once we draw that action card, the enemies might be going, at which point you'll be drawing cards from either their interception or their activation deck, or both, depending on the structure of the board. So without focusing too much on every little detail, as far as the general turn sequence, it's do what you need as far as the cards in your hand, and then draw a card from the action deck and see what happens next. Now, it's worth noting the cards that you draw that are your own can actually go into your hand in order to prep for later. So if Solinar draws a green card and he's not ready to move, he can draw that card into his hand, although you are limited to 4 cards total from all the cards, so you might have to discard a previous card or something like that, but you could go ahead and say, you know what, I do want those 5 moves, but I'll take them later in the round. And that's the core cycle as far as how activations go. As far as what it is you're trying to do as you play, well, you're trying to operate based on your quest objectives, which usually involve wandering towards one of the further out tiles, finding the specific quest tile, doing whatever you need to do on that quest tile, and then escaping the board again, all along trying to ensure you don't die from the various Drakonids or any other situations that may occur. You'll have anything from various alarms that will pop up. Once you get your objective, you're going to draw an alarm card. You might go ahead and have all your Marauders, die, which is not great for your ability to complete the mission. And you're trying to do all this, trying to just survive and accomplish your objectives. Now, the problem is the Drakonids, for the most part, are usually non-threatening, at least until you give them a reason to be. Now, you're going to have square spaces and circle spaces on the board. Here you have a square space, here you have a circle space. Circle spaces are for Marauders only, and they can't be seen by Drakonids in those spaces. So, staying on a circle space is a nice way to remain safe throughout the gameplay. The tricky part is you're going to have to move around as you go. You're going to have to wander from location to location, and you're going to frequently have to pass by the line of sight of the various Drakonids. Now, the good news is passing through the line of sight on its own, not that scary, at least not yet, but the problem is if Drakonids can see you, and they frequently are in very, very annoying places that are in your way, then eventually when they draw a Draconid's action card, if they can see you, they'll draw from the interception deck and have a way where they might try to intercept you. That's where you have things like acting and bribing and smooth talking and dodging, 4 different sets of cards cards, they'll give you different kinds of encounters depending on the interception card you draw, and depending how that encounter goes, you may find yourself hunted. The other opportunity is you may find reason to attack them because you want to take them out and get them out of your way because you're operating with, well, you're trying to get the job done, and sometimes with not enough time. And so in that case, you may want to attract the Drakonids, or there are times where the Drakonids will attack you, depending on if you're hunted, if they see you, and if one of their action cards says to attack you. Now the tricky part is the Drakonids start off the game stronger than you. They're rolling a 10-sided die to your 6-sided die, which if you can do the math, that means you have a much lower chance of actually beating them, although there are things you can do to mitigate that. On your action cards, you're going to have cards that have numbers in the top corner, and you can discard those before a roll, not after, which would be so much better, but before a roll you can discard those to add to your roll, hoping you can go ahead and power up your roll enough. If you know a 6-sided die with a +4, that's already a statistically better chance than a 10-sided die just because you already have the guaranteed locked in +4. So you do have options with discarding cards. You're also going to have various cards that give you abilities to possibly modify tests or do other things that avoid combat entirely, but also you have the opportunity to engage in challenges as you play. You see, there are challenges cards. You're going to draw a random challenge card for the mission, and each time you accomplish whatever the challenge card says, you're going to level up and power up your own die. So your own die in the game gets stronger as you play. You go from a 6-sided die to an 8-sided to a 10-sided, possibly to a 12-sided die, making you stronger than the Drakonids, assuming you accomplish enough challenges as you play. That's one of many tools at your disposal in the game. You're also going to have side quests. At the beginning of the game, you're going to draw a side quest card, and certain tiles will interact with your side quests, so you have an opportunity to try to go ahead and interact with those for whatever benefit those provide, whether it's extra gold, equipment, opportunities in the mission, all of those are available. Now you also have planning cards. Planning cards are one of 3 cards you're going to draw. Well, you're going to draw 3 cards. You're not one of 3. You're going to draw 3 cards and then pick one of those 3 cards at the beginning of the game. And those planning cards give you something else that you can go ahead and pay money. You can pay money in the game. You're going to have money that's going to last between missions, and you can pay that money towards trying to do whatever is on the planning. Whether it's you drugged a guard before the mission began, whether it's the fact that you're going to have a interrupt phase before the alarm goes off. There's a variety of things that will happen. They'll make your life a little easier. You do have to pay money towards those planning cards, but they can help you out in a pinch, which is especially helpful if you're playing on higher difficulty levels. You see, the game has 3 difficulty levels: easy, medium, and hard. And every time you draw a Draconid activation card, you're going to do the easy, medium, and I guess difficult over here, the difficult one over here. So you're going to choose to activate 1, 2, or 3 depending on the difficulty level you're playing at, and that will make your life increasingly harder because easy is kind of like, hey, we're playing this game. Medium is like, I gotta think a little bit, and difficult is actually going to be a bit more of a challenge. You have to really think through what you're doing as you go in order to stay alive. But you're going to have those difficulty levels at play. So again, without getting too much into all the nitty-gritty over here, you have your characters, your Marauders over here on this map. You're going to be moving around the board trying to get towards these tiles. You're going to be mindful of the fact that the Drakonids are stronger than you and constantly in your way, so you have to dodge around them or use effects or equipment or even just raw brute strength attacks to hopefully take them out. Your Marauders usually do not have a lot of wounds. Drak is my favorite over here because Drak has 4 wounds. She's the one who actually takes them down violently. The rest of them kind of have to be very careful because the Marauders are not the only threatening thing. You guys are wandering around behind the scenes, which means frequently as you cross lines, you'll have to make tests in order to go ahead and see whether you can go ahead and safely jump from space to space, or whether you fall and possibly take a wound along the way. So the Drakonids are not the only threat you're dealing with. There's also going to be spots where the board crumples apart, and again, that can hurt the Drakonids, or block line of sight, or possibly get in the way of your Marauders, causing them wounds as well. And so you're juggling all of this as you slowly flip over tiles, as you reveal more Drakonids, as you draw action cards that will spawn Drakonids, activate Drakonids, and have them going after you to try to take you out in the game, and trying to utilize all the various tools. And there's lots of decks of cards, lots of tools, there's artifacts, there's equipment, there's the side quests, there's the challenges, the planning cards, there's a whole set of these the ability cards that are going to give you something when you interact with the Drakonids, and you're trying to use all of those, and of course your deck of Marauder cards as well, in order to go ahead and power through and accomplish the mission. That's kind of the general overview of what's going on in GODS HEIST. I guess long for an overview, but trying to give you a good sense of how this game plays out. Which means it's time for my review, starting off with ease of play, which ease of play is actually pretty solid on this game. The rulebook for this is very, very short. Now, I will say I did have a few questions that I did have to reach out to Triton Noir to clear them up. So for the most part, I think that the rulebook accurately, I would say the rulebook gave me enough that I was able to play the game without worrying about whether I was right or wrong, but I did have questions as I went that weren't covered in the rulebook, and I checked with them after to just check to make sure I was playing them correctly. So most of the rulebook is, well, the rulebook is very straightforward, very, very short, very easy to understand, but it does need a drop of cleanup. Again, prototype, so I'm not worried about that yet, but it does have a few things that weren't covered there. But overall, for the amount going on in this game, I'm used to games like this having much longer rulebooks, and this is very easy to get up and started with because of how short it was. Games are going to be equally short, coming in anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour plus. I'd say a drop over an hour is like the longest it goes, maybe an hour and 15. They're fairly absorbable. You can knock out 3 or 4 of these in a single game night if you wanted to power through. I would say 1 or 2 is almost guaranteed you can do, and then more than that's just up to how much you want to power through this, which is better or for worse, because like I said, I don't know how many missions are in the final game, and if like, again, my prototype has 6, going through 6 could be, 2-3 game nights, and that would be it. So I don't know the final content, so just, again, pro and a con in that sense, depending on the full amount of content in the game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which I started off already, which is the short rules and the fact that it's easy to table. For the amount of decisions based in this game, for the amount of things happening, this is a very easy game to table compared to similar games in the genre, which is already a good thing. But then the game just has a ton of variety baked into it, although I will be talking about a lack of variety in the things I don't like, so I don't want to, as much as I want to give them props to the variety, I want to make a pin over here that I will be coming back to it later. But there's a lot that goes on that makes the game feel variable as you play. Primarily, the challenge cards are going to give you different little mini games you're trying to go through in terms of, hey, I'm doing this, whatever this is, the core mission you're playing as, but you also have to be mindful of, well, what else am I trying to do? I need to be stronger. I need to go ahead and jump from pavilion to pavilion and possibly attack the Drakonids, so I need to up my challenge die. If I don't do so, I'm going to have a harder and harder time, so I need to try to figure out what is the little mini game I'm playing on the challenge side. What are the side quests doing for me, and how important are they to my main goal over here? What about the planning card and what resources does that give me? What about the completely asymmetric Marauders I'm playing as and the very different ways that they approach the game? What about the strength level of those Marauders? What about the tons of ability cards and the interactions you're going to have with the Drakonids? There's just a lot that makes it. Oh, and the equipment cards. There's a whole deck full of equipment cards. There's a whole deck full of artifacts. There's a ton of things that just change up all the very small little details of the game as you go through it, and that's a nice degree of variety going on, but not just variety, also upgrading and progression, because some of that stuff lasts game to game. In general, some things will not reset game to game. Some things will reset or not last. Specifically, your challenge die is going to have to be upgraded every time you die back in. But things like your gold or even your wounds, any wounds you take in combat, you can't just get to the end of a combat and think to yourself, oh, well, you know what? I can afford to take another wound or 2. You could, sure, but then you'll start the next scenario with those wounds or have to pay 10 gold coins to remove them. And money is not that free all over the place, so you're going to have to really decide how you want to try to power through. This is not about a single game you're playing. This is about the progression, both the powering up because you have more equipments and more artifacts, but also, or more gold for that matter, but then also the way things are going to get in your way, specifically those wounds are going to last round to round, so you have to try to ensure that you're staying alive as you go through the system. And there's just a lot of variety in the interactions you're going to have with the Drakonids and with the game state in general because of the way all those things come together. And I like the enemy activation system. I like a few things about the system. First of all, I like the fact that there's this tension of, okay, have we gotten enough done that we're prepared to draw that next action card? That's a fun little moment in the game where you're like, okay, I could go ahead and cause a collapse that would help us possibly, but I also hope that I go first. I don't know if I need to right now. But if I do draw a Drakonids card next, I'm in real trouble because there's 2 Drakonids facing me and I'm not yet hunted. How do I want to handle the situation? What do I want to give up in advance in order to mitigate against, well, a bad situation happening? That's going to be true for the tests as well. You frequently have a choice of, hey, it's a 3+, right? I can roll a 3+ on an 8-sided die. Do I even want to waste my time discarding cards to hopefully buff that roll? And the answer is, it depends on how bad it's going to work out for you if that roll doesn't succeed. You're frequently forced to pause, to examine, am I ready to do this thing that might not work out in my favor? Like I said, this is not a typical activation game where it's you go, enemy goes, you go, enemy goes. But that means you're constantly trying to kind of almost battle against yourself to a degree. Not really, you're battling against the Drakonids, but you set the pace of play. You set the pace of what happens next. And that gives you a lot of decision space in this game that I'm not used to in terms of how you mitigate around that bad luck, in terms of what risks you decide to take as you go. I also like the fact that the activation cards for yourself can go into your hand. So again, you have that opportunity, like if you don't want Draka going right now, and Draka versus Drakonids, I know it sounds bad. Draka's the good guy, Drakonids are the bad guys. But if you have, let's say, a Solinar, to make it easier, if Solinar draws an action card and you don't want to use it, you can go ahead and prep and save it for later. So you have more control there. Again, there's a lot of control over what you can do, but also trying to mitigate around the fact that every once in a while, things don't work out in your favor, dice will roll against you, or Drakonids will activate when it's less ideal for them to activate. So overall, I really like that activation system and the shift from normal games that I'm used to seeing in this space. As far as what I don't like in the game, I'll say two things, although they are both big things. The first is that I am concerned that the game is too easy. For me, I played through a bunch of games on medium. I never even tried easy, honestly, so I can't really speak for easy. But I started my first few games going through medium before I started a game going through on the difficult level to see if that represented more of a challenge. And I haven't lost this game yet. Now, I don't mind winning every game. I really don't. I actually like winning games. When I play a game, I try to win. But for me, what's more important is, do I feel like I was threatened? Do I feel like I could have lost? Did I feel like, I don't care if I win or, well, I do want to win. I try to win. I like winning games, so sue me. But I like feeling like it was difficult. I like winning, but feeling like, oh, I had to really plan and strategize and think through it. And this kind of falls into a medium space there, meaning specifically on medium difficulty, I felt there was a lot of forgiveness. It's where I'd recommend most people start playing. I think easy is going to be too easy. I'm saying that without having played it, but just judging from medium how it was for me. For me, medium represented a good way to learn the game, have forgiveness around making missteps. Before I'm learning to optimize my moves, medium started off as a good place. But by the time I got 2 or 3 games in, medium already felt too easy, and so I started again on difficult to see if that represented more of a challenge. And it certainly does, but with the caveat that I don't think it represents enough of a challenge. I do think difficulty does straddle that line for me, where I do feel I have to optimize. I do feel I have to plan. So I like that. I like the strategic pressure the game has. So this is a complaint-ish. But I think that for me, while I do feel that I have to plan and optimize and think through things when playing on difficult, I also feel like it's still a drop shy of being difficult enough. Now, this is, of course, assuming everything I'm playing correctly, but I believe I am. Like I said already, I reached Troitor Noir, so I think I have everything covered correctly. But it is a game that I do wish was a drop more difficult, because while on difficult, I do feel I have to plan, it is still a little shy from where I would want things to be. And that's, again, on the most difficult level. Not on the medium, on the most difficult level. So I hope there's more to tweak around there. The other complaint is a bigger deal for me, because this one is like, it's an issue, but it's close enough, so it kind of gets a pass there. The other complaint is a bigger one, which is, despite all the variety that the peripherals give, the core gameplay mostly feels the same when you play through it, or at least for me it does. Going through the missions doesn't feel significantly different. You're going to be playing mostly on the same tiles, just shuffled together, and the tiles don't have massive differences in terms of how you engage with them. They have different pathways, but nothing too crazy, and the overall goals you're trying to do aren't drastically, like, there's not a huge variety in terms of what you're trying to do mission to mission. Sure, the setup of the tiles can be a drop different. The distribution of tiles can be a drop different. The enemy cards you encounter will be different. Your cards will be different. So there's a lot of adjacent things around the core puzzle that feel different, but the core things you're doing in every single mission feels somewhat samey, to the point that this is a game that while I really, really like it in a lot of areas, and we'll cover this more in final thoughts, I think that there needs to be more variety in terms of how missions feel. Whether I'm comparing it to Troitor Noir's own game systems, Assassin's Creed or V Sabotage, where the missions feel very, very different as you play through them, or whether I'm comparing it to other games like Cthulhu Death May Die, where every scenario does feel like a different engine as far as what you're doing, this felt much more plug and play. Grab a mission, go to the end tile, try to accomplish your goal, shuffle up a few tiles, and then deal with the peripherals that mix things up. So again, the peripherals are very good at being very different and mixing things up, but the core feeling I get as I play through them, that I think is a little repetitive, and that's my biggest worry as far as where this one will go for me. As far as I can see others not liking, there's lots of randomness in the game. There's lots of mitigation, lots of randomness, lots of cards you'll draw that will have vastly different outcomes. There's lots of dice you're going to be rolling that you can go ahead and rely on, that you only need a 2+, and somehow you manage to roll a 1. Well, I rolled a 2. Still pretty bad, but not as bad as the 1. You'll have lots and lots of opportunities for things to just be random. Now, that will average out over the course of the game, which is why it doesn't bother me, but this has a lot of strategy and a lot of ways that randomness will favor you or hurt you as the game plays. As far as final thoughts on GODS Heist, I'm a little torn, because I really like the game in terms of my experience with it so far. Meaning right now, without a question, this is easily a 4 out of 5 for me, and potentially would have the potential to even go higher. As I see the final game, get to explore more, potentially things can always move in either direction. The tricky part is things can move in either direction. Right now, with how samey each individual scenario does tend to feel, despite all the surrounding variety, I do think this is currently a 4 out of 5, but unless things change, unless the final game has more or different or whatever, this is one that I think would drop to a 3.5 over time, because I really, like, even right now, I still haven't played this enough that I still want to play it more. I still want to go through it. I want to get the final game. I want to go through it all and see more of what's going on. But despite the fact that you could plug and play the same scenario, and the way the scenarios work is, it is a little plug and play. You're going to be shuffling up tiles to set things up, which means this exact scenario I'm playing will be very different the next time I play it, based on the cards, the tiles, everything about the scenario is going to be different. But I think the feeling is still going to be the same. And as long as the feeling's the same, I'm less incentivized to try to, like, go ahead and do mission 2 again. I'd rather do mission 3, then 4, then 5, and at a certain point, even that might not be enough depending on how much they can mix it up. So for right now, I'm coming in at a weird rating-wise in this one. Well, my rating's going to be a 4 out of 5. I'm going to rate this a 4 out of 5 for right now, based on where I currently am, but I've already seen enough of it that I do worry it will go down unless the final game has things that shift that up. So it's positive, could drop down to positive minus, and could go higher to positive plus, depending on how the final game shapes up. In any case, recommendations. If you want other game recommendations, first of all, check out Assassin's Creed. If you want a game that gives you this kind of gameplay, I think Assassin's Creed has a higher barrier to entry, but a lot more reward as far as how good the game can be and how much. I mean, it's a campaign game, so you really have to invest into it more so than this one, but it's a great game that's worth that payoff. And if you want a game that's going to be similarly themed around going into a catacombs, gathering various treasures and trying to escape, while being a very, very different feeling in every other capacity, check out Clank Catacombs for a very different version of trying to gather the treasure and escaping. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.